welcome back, everyone, with me and Stephen Higley with Speaking by Faith podcast. We are continuing our study in the book of John, and this week we're going to pick up in John. I think I said First John. No, the book of John, chapter 1, and this week we'll be starting in verse 19, if I do remember correctly. And I do believe we're going to try to get 19 all the way through 28 about kind of the whole story of John the Baptist and whatnot. I do believe. Ain't that right? Or is it 30?
I think we're going to 28. Let's see how far we get.
Yeah. All right. So let's go.
Start us off.
I'm reading from the New King James Version, and we're in John chapter 1, starting in verse 19. Now this is the testimony of John when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" He confessed and did not deny, but confessed, "I am not the Christ." And they asked him, "What then? Are you Elijah?" He said, "I am not." "Are you the prophet?" He answered, "No." Then they said to him, "Who are you, that we may give an answer to those who sent us? What do you say about yourself?" He said, "I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord, as the prophet Isaiah said." Now those who were sent were from the Pharisees. Whew. All right, that is ending in verse 24. John the Baptist. Verse 19, it says, "And this is the record of John when the Jews sent the priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, 'Who art thou?'" Who are these Jews we're talking about here? A lot of people ask. I think it's just, or who is the Jews that sent them? I think that's the question a lot of people, who sent them? It was the Pharisees.
Right.
And we get that from verse number 24.
Yep.
That's where it tells us the identity. The Pharisees sent him. Why do you guess it was the Pharisees who sent people? Specifically them.
I think this is because they have the numbers. I think that this is because there's bigger. I mean, I don't really know the answer, but that's just my guess. Because, I think it's commonly associated that the Sadducees were the more prominent, but they're smaller class, and the Pharisees were the bigger class.
Yes. Okay. I was just curious myself, and I figured maybe you had a better answer than I could just come up. I just don't really know.
I think it's just called just the numbers. They just had us a bigger group. That's what I think. But
no,
I don't think you can really prove it. I think that's just kind of more a speculation type thing.
Yeah, more of a numbers and more. They probably had. I think sometimes they have always seemed like they've always had a little bit more of authority than the rest of the Jews and the Sanhedrin. There was more. I mean, I guess that goes back to what you said. There's more of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, then you have to get into the whole. I don't know if we should do that right now. But like the Sadducees, they claim to be from the priest Zadok, and they say, well, we are the holy ones, whereas the Pharisees come from the Greek, come from the Hebrew word pharase, which means separate ones. And so you have some that are holy, and they say, we are going to be more affiliated, I guess, with more of like the holy rituals, the holy commandments, those kind of things. And then the Pharisees are saying, well, we're going to be more looser in certain degrees, and be more about how it applies more in daily living and daily interactions and stuff. More so, they both have very similar positions, though, like very close. It's just kind of a few nuances type thing.
Now, I've heard another thing. I'm gonna ask this really quickly and say my point, and we need to move on. We go down the rabbit hole.
You're all good.
Now, the Sadducees didn't believe in the spirit, right?
Yeah.
Spirit. So I've heard someone say it had to be the Pharisees because of who they was asking. Are you the Messiah? Are you? Specifically they asked about Elijah. Are you Elijah? Right. Well, if it had been Elijah, it would have been a spirit, and it wouldn't have been something the Sadducees would have been want to ask about. I mean, because they didn't believe in spirits, so why would they even want to ask if it was Elijah? It would have been either a spirit or resurrection, and they didn't believe in resurrection either, right?
Correct. Now that resurrection there, though, in like Matthew 23 and Acts 23 there, is dealing, I think, not with the. Well, I think the Acts one is dealing with Christ's resurrection. I think the Matthew one is dealing with a general resurrection of the Jews that they believed. Guys, as I said before, so they already had that established before Christ even came, I think. So I think it's dealing with that they didn't believe in a general resurrection, which you can find verses for that under the Old Testament, but they just didn't believe that.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So I've heard
separate.
that.
Now, here's the thing, though. Why do you think in verse 19 there's three different groups mentioned: Jews, priests, and Levites? Aren't they all Jews?
Well, the Jews, and I hate this. I told you I left my commentary, and I had
this. No, you're all good. This, and why I'm asking this is because this little verse starts a John exclusive. Only John will do this separation here.
Yeah. Man, I had this specifically underlined. The Jews was referring to as a group, or it was always considered as a. I'm trying to remember. My memory's so terrible. Oh, Stephen, go ahead and explain it because I'm a mess it up.
No, you're all good. No, I'm sure once I say it, you'll be like, oh, there it is. But so John makes it show from the very beginning that it was always the Jewish leaders that had a problem. That the people were easily swayed and go any way that the wind was blowing. But very, very typically, when he mentions Jews, it's very typically referring to the Jewish leader. And so this is saying that it wasn't just. So he's separating the leaders from the crowd.
Yes.
From the populace there. Okay.
And John, you said John's the one that most occasionally, when he says the Jews, he is specifically talking about the Sanhedrin.
Right.
Versus, I think when the other synoptic gospels talk about the Jews, it's more of a
general group.
A general group. I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to get it out of my.
Yeah. That's just one of the things for John. John really, I think, kind of hammers down as you just read more in John, you kind of begin to pick up on those kind of things here, there. And this is one where it is a very separate class to me, because a Levite is a Jew, a priest is a Jew. But right here, why it's saying the Jews sent the Jews of the Jews. What is that about? So it has to be a certain particular class distinction there.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's, even between, the priest and Levites, there's even a separation of them two also. And I can't remember why he separated those two either. But I have it underlined. I know. Yeah,
no, that's okay. Well, I tell you, one of the things though is actually found in 1 Kings 13:33, where it says that Jeroboam, one of the things that he did was he separated the priesthood from the Levites, and so he instead of the Levites being the priests like they're supposed to be, when Jeroboam came in there in 1 Kings 13, it says that he pulled them, as is my terminology, he pulled them out from the people, and then they became priests.
Yeah.
So it changed from more of like a family thing to more of just this is an occupation now. And that was all a part of the transition of righteousness down to idolatry, was this change of priesthood thing too.
Yep.
And so
exactly.
And to me that just kind of carried along.
All right, I follow you. I get what you're saying. So goes on. These people, these Jews, these Pharisees, they're curious if John the Baptist was the Messiah, that had been promised in Scripture. They wanted to know his identity. And you kind of got to understand why they wanted, because John the Baptist was getting a lot of attention, throughout the land. Mark 1:5 says all the country of Judea and all of Jerusalem, they was coming. A lot of people was coming to John the Baptist to hear him preach and proclaim the Messiah, or preach. It was a big deal. They wanted to know who was getting all their attention, because they like that attention. They like to have the people following them, listen to them. But when you got somebody else that's getting larger crowds, they're starting to get jealous, I think, basically. So they're curious, like, who is this man?
Yeah. And then verse 20 comes in, where he says he confessed, he did not deny, but confessed. I like how it's said twice there. I am not the Christ. And so he's showing great emphasis. I'm not Messiah. You're looking for somebody else. But and then that's when you're going about, who are you then? Are you Elijah? He said, I am not. Are you the prophet? And now notice that article there, the prophet.
The prophet, that's right.
And that comes up again in John 4.
Or that. I think New King James says that prophet.
That prophet?
But it's still the definite article. I know what you're getting at.
Right, and that's from Deuteronomy 18 there, 15.
That's right.
And so and that prophet was associated with Messiah. So it's interesting here that he says, are you Elijah? No. Are you the Messiah? Or what they call right now the prophet? He says no. So it's interesting here, that they're asking, let me go back up here. I'm not who you want me to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I picked up on that too, and you said, they used the word confess twice. It's like he is making sure, he is letting them know, I am not the Messiah. I had the same thing down. They thought of that prophet, or the prophet, which was being described by Moses in Deuteronomy 18, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But the prophet that Moses was identifying or describing is identified in the New Testament, and I think it's Acts chapter 3, 20 through 23. That's Christ. That's who it is. So, anyways, you're right. He's making sure that they know he is not the Messiah. He is not who they want him to be.
Right.
Why do you think? Why was they wanting to know if it was him? What do you think if he would have said, "Yeah, I'm the Messiah"? What would they have done to him?
Probably start questioning him, and this is how they did with Jesus. You probably try to kill him. That's all kind of. I think the same stuff, just different person.
That's what I think. I think they would just try to kill him.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing, just different. Somebody different.
Straight out the gate. And you think about it, John had the opportunity to fool them all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He had the opportunity to fool them all. Say, yeah, I'm the Christ. I'm him. And then he could have got put up on this pedestal, and he could have got them to do anything he wanted to do. But as long as he kind of followed in their ways and doing, stuff if he would have just continued on how the Jewish population, most of them was doing that day, especially the Sanhedrin, all of them, being deceitful and what I forget the word left me.
Ugly.
Yeah, basically, if he would have just fell in line with them, they would put him up there. Man, he could have lived like a king for the rest of his life.
Sure.
He should do that. So you can look at John the Baptist as being a great example for us to follow. We may be a great preacher or a great teacher, but we still need to remember who is above us and who we're working for, who we're following.
Right.
I'm gonna quit rambling.
No, it's all good. It's all good. But John was always supposed to be, because John came in the spirit of Elijah. Yeah. And Elijah represented the prophets. You think about on the Mount of Transfiguration there, how you have Moses and Elijah.
Yep.
Moses was also the lawgiver, and Elijah was representing the prophets. And so And then in Malachi 3:1 and 4:5, we see that he was going to come in the spirit of Elijah.
Mm-hmm.
And then in Luke 1:17, at the very annunciation of the birth of John the Baptist, there was a very clear heralding of this is the forerunner. This is the guy's going to tell us about Jesus. And it's interesting there that was all Elijah, the spirit of Elijah's doing there, which I find that interesting. But and then verse 22 comes in, and then they said to him, "Who are you, that we may give an answer to those who sent us?" Again, there's your authority there. Someone sent you. It wasn't just the Jews people, it was the leaders. Yep. And then what do you say? Here's, I think, why this is the answer to your question. What do you say about yourself? Well, they're going to start questioning.
Yep.
And then he said, verse 23, where he quotes Isaiah 40, verse 3 here. I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord, as the prophet Isaiah has said.
That's right. I think I've said this before. John makes it clear that his identity is really not that important. It was his work that he was meant to do what was important. Not who I am, it's what I'm doing, why I'm here, and why am I doing this. That was the importance of him, but they just kept, they want to know, are you the Christ, are you the Christ? And they needed to listen to him and see that he was just trying to prepare them. It was even, Gabriel told him, I think you just mentioned that, right? Gabriel, the angel, told his father, he's going to be the one to prepare. Prepare for the Christ, prepare for the Messiah. Luke 1:16 through 17.
Right.
And to help turn the people to the Lord.
Right.
Making ready a prepared people. Now today, I kind of worked on my notes a little bit before I come over too. I've never heard of this, but I've seen this from an article off Christian Courier. It said some people try to say they use this shadow figuring or whatever, shadows and
types of shadows.
Yep. Yeah, say it. Look, you the straighten me out. David, right?
Okay.
David prepared the material for the temple for Solomon. First Chronicles chapter 22, 2 through 5. So David is a shadow of, like, John the Baptist prepared material for the builder Solomon, or Christ, because Christ is the one that built the church. John prepared the people for that. And I would go on to say those prepared people are the people of Acts 1, the 120, plus the disciples or the apostles. And then Acts 2:41, it says they was added to them. I think that is the prepared people. John prepared those people by his baptism, which we'll get into later. They prepared them for Christ. Acts 2:47, because it was the Lord that added it to the church, right? Anyway, so that's who he was. That was his purpose. He was there to prepare the way, to prepare the materials for the church, the beginning of it.
Right.
And I run across that today, and I kind of thought that was a good. I wanted to try to get that point. He prepared, and that could be another rabbit hole you could go down if you want it, because some people try to say the ones before Christ that obeyed John's baptism needed to be rebaptized.
Oh, right.
I'm kind of on the fence. I really don't know. I don't know, but
I don't think so. I think before Jesus, John's baptism, even Christ was baptized with John's baptism. And even, I think it's in, I want to say Luke 7, verse 30, it talks about baptism inside of the same breath as being justified.
Yes.
And that's dealing with John's baptism. And, I think it's all until the cross and all into Acts 2 there, when the church is in full power, Um,
I used to be against it now, and this is just long. I know, kind of getting off a little bit, but we only got one more verse
yeah,
to
well,
cover. Well, I used to think, because what cleanses sin? The blood of Christ. How could they have been cleansed before the blood of Christ? Well, Christ come, and he died on the cross for who? For all men, not just men after the cross, but for all. So that, it was after, but we need to remember it was before. So all those faithful, loyal Jews that had passed on,
mm-hmm.
When he died and that blood was shed, and his death, burial, and resurrection, all that, they was washed. That's when their sins was forgiven. So therefore, those ones that John baptized would fall into the same category as the loyal faith. That's what they were. They was being loyal, faithful Jews. So I'm still studying a little bit on that, but that's the way I'm looking at it now.
Yeah.
And the reason I used to not think that was because of the ones that Paul met in Ephesus. I think it's
Acts 19.
16. Which one?
19?
Is it 19?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought six. Anyway, but you know what I'm talking
about. It's upside down 6.
Oh. Yeah, but
so we'll give it to you, but it's 19.
Yeah, I always use that to defend why they needed to be those people needed to be rebaptized. But from what I've read over the weekend, it was these men apparently was baptized after John died, and this was when Christ had already died. Obviously, yes, because it's in Acts, but they had obeyed John's teaching, baptism, after John's death, and after Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. So
yeah,
they had obeyed the wrong. They obeyed it in truth, but they was just taught. They was taught wrong. They didn't know. They was the ones that they was. What is ignorant? Ignorant means it's not mean you're silly or you're dumb. It's just mean they didn't know. They was ignorant of the truth. So that's where I'm at now. So I may be wrong, but I think it's more logical.
Now in John 4, verses 1 and 2, it is interesting there. It says, "And when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John."
Yes.
It's interesting that he made and baptized more disciples, but he was, I believe, he was performing, in a sense, John's baptism.
Yes, I agree with that. That's what I think too.
Yeah.
But a lot of people take that out of context. They think Jesus was the one actually doing all the baptizing.
That's verse 2.
You got to look at verse 2. The only ones he baptized was his disciples. And that's another thing, that these people, they was doing they was being baptized by what? Jesus' authority.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But that shows, and that was a question that even Christ himself faced when someone said, "Well, what about John's baptism? Is it from man or is it from God?" And then they said, "Well, if we say it's from man, then they view him as a prophet. If we say it's from God, then we're in the wrong. We're not obeying John." And so they went away and they, had a problem. That proves again that John's baptism was heaven sanctioned. It was allowed. It was permitted. So
I had that. I had that in my next notes for verse 25.
Of course.
This baptism, John's baptism, is not borrowed from some Jewish sect. It was from God. It was ordained by God. Matthew 21.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And I think John 4 verse 2 though, I personally take that verse as saying that it was the disciples baptizing people.
Yes.
And Jesus did not do that at all. And and I think also is a very big thing, because you see that as a problem even in 1 Corinthians 1 and the church in Corinth, how they said, well, there's 4 camps in this church. There's the Christ camp, the Apollos camp, the Peter camp, and the Paul camp. And each one say, well, I was baptized by so-and-so, therefore I'm this, that, and the other above you and that, and, whatever. And so I think that the great wisdom there of Jesus not baptizing somebody is to just show that there's no like super apostle, a super disciple that says, well, I was baptized by Jesus. Well, I think that was in God's wisdom to not make that happen.
Yes, exactly. I agree with you 100%. And a lot of people try to use that verse in 1 Corinthians to get around the importance of baptism.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And where Paul is just trying to emphasize, it doesn't matter, it's not the importance ain't who baptized you. The importance is that you're obeying God's will.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, that's what I got. But yeah, people try to use that to out of context to get around baptism.
Right.
Ooh.
All right. Well, let's look at verse 24 rather.
Yep.
And you want to go?
Yeah. And they which were sent were of the Pharisees. Now, I don't have any notes for verse 25 because it's pretty clean and cut there. To me, it is. Now, do you have anything specifically on verse 24?
Yeah. I'll read you what I got. So, not everyone that comes to Jesus came with the right motives.
Yeah.
These guys came from the Pharisees. That's verse 19, and they came with questions and such. Then the Pharisees are the holy ones. Several very famous Pharisees: Gamaliel, Saul of Tarsus, Nicodemus, and Joseph of Arimathea. I'll read you what I got here on the Pharisees. The Pharisees were spiritual descendants of pious groups that had successfully opposed the notoriously cruel government of Antiochus Epiphanes. This Syrian monarch had attempted to obliterate the Jewish faith between 175 and 163 BC. The Pharisees were extremely scrupulous about observing every minute detail of the law of God as they understood it, and were engaged in establishing an oral tradition about how that law was to be obeyed. And they'll follow the apostles around for a long time.
They do. They follow them and question them. They'll follow Jesus around and try to get him hemmed up, but he just uses scripture and always shows them how they're wrong, and they need to correct themselves. But they were not a good group of people. I kind of feel bad for them because there's good ones in there. But I was just always curious, how many of these Pharisees actually finally, maybe they did submit, especially after Paul's conversion. Because he was in that group. He was with them.
Sure.
Some try to say that Paul might have even been in the Sanhedrin. I forget where I read that, but it was.
Well, it's cause of him casting his vote.
Yeah, that's right. That's where it's at. And so
in Acts 23 there.
So I'm always just real curious, once he was converted with his strong connection to these Jews, these Pharisees that hated Jesus, was he able to convert, many of the ones that, and you got to think about it. Some of these Jews were still alive, that quite possibly did kill Jesus, or
Sure.
I mean, I'm just curious, how many of those men did he convert? Sad.
I don't know, and I think this also is a lesson too, that everyone says, well, about people who are religious, they're all hypocrites and evil. Well, even Christ was crucified by somebody who was religious.
Yeah.
So being religious doesn't mean that you're right or wrong. You can make bad choices either way. And unfortunately, you have people here who are religious who are acting badly. And so you have to be very mindful about your own self and keep yourself in check there. That's 2 Corinthians 13:5 about, examine yourself whether you're in the faith, lest you become a reprobate. I think that's what the verse said. Yeah, so you have to be very careful about your own soul. Don't get carried away with being, thou art holy, holier art thou type thing.
Yeah, people tend to forget that, man. It's like, oh, y'all people at church, y'all Christians, y'all not perfect. I tell how I answer that is that you're exactly right. I am not perfect, but that is exactly why I'm going to church and I'm going to worship,
right?
And trying to do better every day is because, that's the whole point. That's the whole point. Because if I do what you're doing, there's no hope. There's no hope.
Right. And I saw a while ago. I've always thought it was really good. That if you see somebody at the gym who's really, really unfit, would you judge the person and say, well, you shouldn't be here? You're just so unfit. You don't look the right part. You're not muscular. And would you tell that person to go out of the gym? No, you probably say, let me help you out, or extra encouraging, that person, or whatever. Where it's interesting though that if you see that person is where they believe that they have to be to get in a better condition, everyone's normally be pretty friendly with you and encouraging and that kind of stuff. But man, if you take that same kind of idea for the church, it's like that's how it should be. Everyone there. The church is meant to be a hospital for sinners, not a museum for the saints. So, so I think when you think about that, we're not saying that you have to be the most vile person in the entire, everyone there is like from prison.
Yeah.
but obviously, the church is made up of imperfect people. No one is perfect in the church.
And he is the great physician.
Correct. Yeah, Luke 5:32. That's right. He's the great physician. Yeah.
That's right, man. That's good stuff there, man. I like that.
Yep.
The church is the hospital. That's right, where we go to get fixed by the great physician.
That's it, man.
Hey, man, that'd preach right there.
All day.
That'd preach.
Yeah. Well, I say we shut down shop on verse 25. We are in our scheduled time limit today. And so, as always, we'll pick up next week on verse 25 and go on. But as always, if you have any questions or comments want to add to the discussion, feel free to do so. We're always up to that. We are very thankful to have some new subscribers and people who have liked the page on our Facebook page. Also very happy for you. Thank you very much. And so, I don't got anything else to add. Do you have anything you want to say or add or undo?
Repent of? Yeah, no. Thanks for all the support, everybody watching and sharing and subscribing. That's really big. We really thank y'all. Thank y'all so much. I always like to close it. Blue advice. I'm gonna stick with the same one again. Pray, because I think that's where a lot of Christians. We all, and that's myself included, we all struggle to have a devoted prayer life. And it's our number one tool that we have. So pray, and pray some more.
Yep.
And that's it. That's all I got.
All right. Well, I'm going to end it, and we'll see you around next time. Have a good rest of your day.